Hey guys, welcome back to episode 2 of the Slipstream. Here are your hosts. I'm Ash.
I'm Trey.
I'm Sachet.
And we are talking about a little bit about F1 today because there are some interesting developments going on. But before we get into it, we wanted to introduce the teams a little bit since we were giving you updates. So to start you guys off, there are 10 teams in F1. The first one, we have McLaren. We talked a lot about them last episode. We have Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris as our two main drivers, and Principal Zach Brown.
And McLaren is going through a little bit of an anti-hero arc almost because they have been the most dominant team since arguably mid-season 2024. But if you look back at their history just 10, even 5 to 10 years ago, they were fighting in the midfield and at some points the back markers. They had two memorable seasons where they were 9th in 2015 and 2017, and in a couple they were 6th and 5th and 4th.
And it's also worth mentioning that Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris are also competing with Red Bull in RB21 and are pretty dominant drivers there too, even so much so that they're putting Max Verstappen to shame, which is not very good news for our Dutch hero.
Definitely not. I mean, 4 titles in a row and it's all coming crashing down, just like the Red Bull Empire, who we should mention has currently Max Verstappen as kind of their golden boy since the 2017 season, and Yuki Tsunoda currently driving alongside him, who I argue is going to be the 7th, maybe even 8th second Red Bull driver to suffer what fan bases like to call the second seat curse.
Yep, the cursed second Red Bull seat. Max Verstappen, called the golden boy, youngest F1 driver ever at 17 years old. Lots of back-to-back wins. 2023, 2024 world champion. Fun fact about his 2023 season, had all straight wins except for 4 races, I believe, out of 24, so quite impressive. Principal was formerly Christian Horner, now replaced by Laurent Mekies due to a controversy. A extension of Red Bull is also called the Racing Bulls. We will also call it VCARB, which stands for the Visa Cash App Racing Bulls. This is kind of a not immature kind of team for younger drivers. We have Liam Lawson and Isaac Hadjar, Isaac Hadjar is a newly promoted F1 driver from F2. Principal is Alan Permain.
And then continuing forth, we have Mercedes-AMG Petronas, Go Silver Arrows, my favorite team of the grid. They have George Russell, who is kind of a prospect to the team. He drove for the Mercedes Academy in his F2 days, and then he drove for Williams in a much less dominant but developing car. And he joined Mercedes in 2022, racing alongside 19-year-old, recently 19, happy late birthday, Kimi Antonelli, the first Italian driver since Antonio Giovinazzi when he drove for Alfa Romeo, now Sauber, in 2021, and who has been in a bit of a rough patch throughout the summer season.
I agree. He had a very couple of high races in the beginning and has dropped off a bit now. Going back to George Russell, he's kind of an underrated character in my opinion because he performs really well, has a lot of podiums in his career, especially in this season and last season. So I think he doesn't get the credit he deserves. And principal for Mercedes is Toto Wolff. Moving on to the Williams, we have my favorite, Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon, with principal James Vowles.
And then going forth for some more information on the Williams team, James Vowles was actually, I believe, the chief strategist or chief engineer for Mercedes before he left to take on his own role in 2023 and has been doing stellar work for the Williams team. They're currently looking to finish 5th in the World Constructors' Championship out of 10 teams. And they have been on a pretty consistent roll, such as Alex Albon's consistent point finishes in the middle section of the 2023 season, Franco Colapinto getting in the points regularly ever since he joined mid-season in 2024. Of course, he's had a bit of a fall-off, which we can analyze a little bit later. And now he's doing pretty good with a smooth operator.
Franco Colapinto was a Williams driver last year in 2024. Since then, he's moved to Alpine with Pierre Gasly and Principal Flavien Briatore. Other teams we have, of course, the beloved Ferrari, Scuderia Ferrari, with Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, and Principal Frederic Vasseur. Aston Martin with Fernando Alonso, Lance Stroll, and Principal Andy Cowell.
Lance Stroll, often regarded as Lance Daddy's Cash Stroll, because his dad has been funding his career since
bit of a Nepo baby.
Yeah.
since the 2018 season.
So, Lance Stroll's father, Lawrence Stroll, actually owns the company, which is why many people think he's got a seat. But, you know, a little too much hate on Lance Stroll, I believe.
Like, remember the overcast that we were talking about at Zandvoort this upcoming weekend?
Mm-hmm.
I looked on the Instagram page, and as a matter of fact, he did pretty good in first practice. He got top 3.
He did. I will say in F2, I believe he had a massive crash, but, you know, hope he's well. And Fernando Alonso, a big, big champion.
Yes. But honestly, his career, as I like to call it, and probably he calls it, it's a yoke. A yoke. But yeah, he has had a history of making some pretty unlucky career moves, such as sticking around with Ferrari up until 2014, when they made arguably the worst car, the Ferrari F14T, in modern day history, especially, you know, considering how they were a force to be reckoned with in 2010, 2011, 2012, and the first half of 2013. Moved to McLaren when they were kind of the back markers, and then moved to Alpine when they were sort of in development, taking on the new brand. Aston Martin, 2023, good season, 8 podiums, but then they had a major fall off in 2014.
And some other teams that we have left, we have Kicksauber with Nico Hülkenberg and recently promoted rookie Gabriel Bortoleto from F2 to F1 and principal Jonathan Wheatley.
And one thing that we should mention about Gabriel Bortoleto is that he is the only driver from his F2 career to go from last to first on the grid in the Monza feature race in 2024. And not only that, but he's been putting in some pretty consistent performances throughout his F3 career, a lot of wins and podiums, and taking the F2 championship, I think, his first or second season. And he's been proving a whole lot, especially with some performances like Hungary and before that in Spain and Canada.
And speaking of consistency, Nico Hülkenberg has a pretty consistent career so far, a very reliable driver, until recently when he got his first podium.
Yes.
Very
Only
exciting.
at the cost of Lewis Hamilton, though. I wanted to smile. I wanted to cry. Oh, man. It's just like an eye for an eye.
I agree.
Yeah.
And lastly, we have Haas, sponsored by MoneyGram, so also known as MoneyGram Haas. Again, another rookie promoted from F2, Oliver Behrman, who in 2024 was a reserve driver for Ferrari and replaced Carlos Sainz for one race. Was it one race?
It was one race, the Saudi Arabian
and it was
Grand
the
Prix.
Saudi Arabian Grand Prix last year, and had to replace Carlos Sainz because of his appendix surgery. So that's Oliver Behrman, as well as Esteban Ocon with principal Ayo Komatsu,
who replaced Günther Steiner at the end of the 2023 season when Haas had their second worst season up to date, scoring 10th and last with only 12 points. Of course, at that moment, they were not rock stars. They were a different word, which I don't think I can use for the podcast quite yet. Depends on whether or not we keep this family-friendly audience. But case in point, they're doing a whole lot better, consistently getting in the points, but they still need to step it up a notch if they want to perform well in this new upcoming era, 2026, going forward.
Now we're going to talk about a little bit about the driver switch-ups from 24 to 25. First of all, the much debated, much talked about Lewis Hamilton switch-up from Mercedes to Ferrari. So this was of his own choice, moving away from Mercedes and taking up a contract at Ferrari. Because Hamilton is so revered as a big F1 driver, he replaced Carlos Sainz, which left Carlos with a few lower team options, such as Williams, and he had maybe a chance for Mercedes, but Toto Wolff kind of made it clear that he was signing Kimi Antonelli from F2, and so Carlos joined Williams.
But then again, let's be honest, he got really screwed over by Red Bull, not rejecting him specifically, but not even considering or talking to him. Remember, when he joined Formula One back in 2015, he was part of the Red Bull Academy and a crucial piece to their development
Indeed.
and the brand name.
Yes.
He was in Toro Rosso, which is now known as V-Carb, and then I think he got dropped for the likes of, was it either Nico Hülkenberg or Jolyon Palmer? No, Jolyon Palmer got
Not
dropped from Renault.
Mm-hmm.
And he moved to Renault, and then he got sacked from there, moved to McLaren, left there. Ferrari sacked him for Lewis Hamilton. Big names go to big prospects.
Right.
But he seems to be doing okay with Williams.
Mm-hmm. And some other developments that were early in the 2025 season. So Tsunoda was a big driver for V-Carb for quite a while. And they recently made the switch from Tsunoda from V-Carb to Red Bull early in the season. We had Max Verstappen and Liam Lawson in Red Bull earlier. Tsunoda replaced Lawson in Red Bull, and then Lawson went to V-Carb in place of Tsunoda. So there was that driver switch up. So now we have Liam Lawson and Isaac Hadjar in the V-Carb, and Yuki Tsunoda and Max Verstappen in Red Bull. Another big driver development earlier this season was the Jack Doohan drop. So Jack Doohan, another rookie, was in Alpine with Pierre Gasly, was not performing that well. Actually, we'll never know because he wasn't given that much of an opportunity.
Not.
And let's be honest, Flavio Briatore talks a big talk. He is supposedly big man, made Alonso who Alonso is.
Yes.
You know, karma guy, all the time you have to leave the space. Made all of these kind of, you know, like elements and character developments about him. But he's got to remember, this isn't the 90s and 2000s where you can just swindle your way through a season and still come out on top.
Right.
And
True.
for him to impulsively act on his own internal, I guess,
Ego,
thoughts.
I guess.
Yeah, it's like, you got to give these people a chance. But we could say the same to Horner, because only 2 races were given to Liam Lawson for him to prove himself in the second seat, which has been, again, cursed and flipped topsy-turvy turned over.
Yeah, this has been a continuous issue for the past couple of seasons of promoting rookies earlier than they are ready. So Liam Lawson has been victim to it. Jack Doohan has been victim to it. Franco Colapinto a little bit as well in the 2024 season when he got promoted to the Williams, got dropped, and then got re-promoted to Alpine.
I think this is also a matter of team dynamic, because if we look into the history of both Alpine and Red Bull on their own respective regards, they're pretty toxic all around. Because remember,
to their rookies.
To the rookies, but also to their upper staff. Like, remember Otmar Safnauer, the former team principal for Alpine from 2021 to 2023, mid-season 2023. He got dropped because of a severe lack of performance, even though they were consistently performing in the midfield, the most mid team in the modern day of Formula One. And he still somehow got dropped. And then they bring in Flavio Briatore, one of the most notorious and shamed cheaters in motorsport history. And with Red Bull, a cursed second seat, they go Scott Speed to Jamie Alguersuari to Fitiano Liuzzi, Kvyat, Gasly, Lawson, Tsunoda. Perez and Ricciardo seem to have at least retained some kind of value.
Yeah, I think Sergio Perez and Daniel Ricciardo, who are big names in F1, were kind of the only drivers to stick it out in Red Bull for a longer period of time than the other drivers Trey just named. But speaking on Sergio Perez right now, we have very interesting news about the very much loved Sergio Perez, also deemed as Checo in the F1 world. Him and Valtteri Bottas are now signed for the 11th created team, Cadillac, in F1. Cadillac is an American-based team, and it's very interesting because we love Checo, and he got dropped from Red Bull last year due to performance issues, contractual issues, and that was heartbreaking because we loved Checo, and Valtteri Bottas was another F1 driver with prominent stats and was just placed on an underperforming team, and wasn't able to shine as much, and he's another fan favorite that got sent to the back. So we're glad to see them back again.
And just a bit of a rundown on the whole team. Well, not the entire team, but just the main elements and the people who make it up that make up the brand. So we have the two drivers who have arguably been number 2 drivers for quite some time in their Formula One careers.
Indeed, they have.
Valtteri Bottas, a driver from Finland who has driven for Williams, Mercedes, Alfa Romeo, and Sauber beforehand. He is coming into this new season with 10 wins, 67 podiums, 20 pole positions, and almost 1,800 career points across almost 250 Grand Prix starts. We have Sergio Pérez, who is a Mexican driver who has raced for Sauber, McLaren, Force India twice, Racing Point, and Red Bull for his 4 seasons in a row. Before coming to the American brand, he has accumulated 6 wins, 39 podiums, 3 pole positions, and 1,638 career points across 281 Grand Prix starts.
And together they have over 500 races and 16 wins between the pair. They'll have produced fully their own engines by 2028, though this team is coming into the sport in 2026. They'll be run by over 400 employees and 200 more by the start of the upcoming season.
And we have a lot of promising, and I say promising because they have made quite a few contributions to the motorsport in not just the front end, but also the back end, such as lower teams and, kind of like beginning developments. We have Dan Torres, who is the chief executive officer of the team. He co-founded one of the Formula Rental teams called Iger Racing. Formula Rental is kind of like Formula 3, except it's a more European or a Europe-based brand.
Mm-hmm.
And he was also employed the senior engineer at Marussia from 2011 to 2015, and he actually got to witness the team's first point-scoring occasion with Jules Bianchi, rest in peace to his soul, and we thank him for the development of the halo in modern-day sport. He scored his first points for himself and the team in Monaco 2014, his home race. And we also have Pat Simmons, who is the executive engineering consultant, who was the chief technical officer for Williams during the dominant period in 2014 to 2016, where Bottas was one of the drivers back then. So a bit of a familial history.
And I hear that there is a bit of controversy of Pat Simmons.
Oh boy.
Involving Crashgate. Now, what is Crashgate?
Well, Crashgate is infamously one of the most scandalous incidents in Formula One and arguably enough motorsport history. So to run it down, it happened at the Singapore Grand Prix in 2008, where Pat Simmons was the engineer and strategist for the Renault team, which is now Alpine, and he told Nelson Piquet Jr. to deliberately crash his car down, I think, the bridge underpass straight.
Now, sometimes in F1, the race engineers will ask their drivers to sacrifice. That usually means giving up a position to their teammate. Like, for example, if we had Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris going in 3rd and 4th place and the race engineers asked Oscar Piastri to give the place to Lando, they would make that switch on the racetrack. Now, that type of sacrifice is
completely illegal, and he used very specific code words, but of course the FIA has the replay cameras, and they can always tell. And sometimes even these drivers will fess up to it. But case in point, Piquet Jr. was told to sacrifice his car in order to get Alonso to win in a much less dominant car. It's kind of funny in hindsight. It's very funny in hindsight because he won the Japanese Grand Prix race the next weekend on merit, so they could have easily avoided the stuff, but a bunch of loopholes, like Felipe Massa would have become world champion, or Sebastian Vettel could have at least had a chance to get 7th place. What else? Raikkonen probably would have started contending if he really hadn't had strategy screwed up. So many loopholes, but we'll get to that in another episode.
Now, this is kind of an issue because now we are already, Pat Simmons is not even the executive engineer of Cadillac just yet, and we're already questioning his ethics of the team under his guise.
And we're questioning the integrity under not only his guys, but under the guys of the drivers, because they've had their own kind of petty moments as well. Bottas, not as much. Checo, maybe just a little bit, but then again, he got really screwed over by Red Bull.
Right, and we're already going into the 2026 season with Cadillacs, both drivers under penalties.
Yes, that is correct, because Bottas's penalty, it did expire, but the penalty itself still kind of looms over him.
Yes, and I think it's presumably set to come back according to the FIA.
Oh, really?
Yes, I think that in the 2026 season he is set to serve those penalties.
I don't know how I feel about that. They're very particular about their rules, and
right. I think, in my opinion, I think this is ridiculous because he was a driver in 2024. Has not driven at all in the 2025 season, being brought back for the 2026 season. Those penalties should be dropped.
You know what they should do? They should replace Antonelli for one of the races and bring Bottas in so he can serve the penalty.
I was just about to say that.
Yes.
Go ahead and serve those penalties as a number 2 driver in Mercedes real quick, and then go back.
Go back to your old career. Don't let Mohammed bin Sulayem step on you like that.
Yes, exactly.
And we get to another, I guess, not as controversial, but kind of questionable about the skills of the drivers. It's how Checo Pérez has essentially been forgiven by the whole fan base because they realized that not only was the number 2 seat a developmental issue in Red Bull, but also how he was treated and kind of the, in hindsight, indirect racism that he faced despite having so much sponsorship and so much influence over the team on a socioeconomic standpoint. But it doesn't take away the fact that his 2024 season was pretty freaking abysmal.
Yeah.
It was so despicable.
Awful.
Consistently performing in the midfield or worse, usually in the worst.
And let's just go on a rundown of his head-to-head with Max Verstappen, who just came out as world champion in the race before the penultimate race in 2024. 6 Q1 eliminations from Monaco to Abu Dhabi, all on different occasions, compared to Max Verstappen, who made it to Q3 in I think every single race, which is something he has not been able to pull off in his career in a single season. A 150-plus point deficit. No, a 285-point deficit, only 152 points in 8th place in the World Drivers' Championship. No poles to Max's 8, 3 DNFs, all his faults, and half a lap behind Max Verstappen in the average race.
Right now, Bottas is serving as the Mercedes reserve driver and is doing some PR, which is why he's coming back as a fan favorite. But combined with those stats, we are kind of on the edge of our seats to see how he will perform in this new season.
Yeah, I mean, Sauber, it was also a pretty deplorable team. I argue it was worse than the Haas VF21 back in 2021, because even though they were able to score a point, it was on pure strategy luck, because I believe it was Alex Albon's Williams that had a technical issue where the mirror fell off, and they brought in the safety car pretty late, so that allowed Zhou Guanyu to score 4 points in P8 that season. They still finished in last, but Bottas, I mean, he really didn't have a chance to show.
And for those of you who don't know, Zhou Guanyu was a driver for Kick Sauber last year and now is a reserve driver for Ferrari. Moving to Perez, he had scored wins consistently in the RB17 and 18. Up until 2024, he only got 4 podiums in the RB20 and was sacked amidst the postseason testing after 2024.
Yeah, so it's kind of a shame that Checo could have had his career nearly end in this sort of tragic fashion. I would compare it to some other Red Bull drivers who had their careers essentially ended or within the Red Bull Academy, like Daniel Kvyat, who was dropped by AlphaTauri in the 2020 season, despite having some pretty consistent performances, and it looked like his contract would extend to 2022. Or even David Coulthard, who I think a lot of people forget, he raced for Red Bull from 2005 when they came out as a debut. to 2008. And unfortunately, despite 2 podiums in 2008, he ended it off with the first lap DNF.
Mm-hmm. And so, all in all, Checo and Bottas are very talented drivers who just haven't had much luck in the past couple seasons with their teams and such. As drivers, we feel that they will put up a really good fight, but we have to talk about the car's performance. The car is what separates the drivers. Like, for example, Nico Hulkenberg, great driver, but driving a really, really bad car. And then, in my opinion, we have Lando and Oscar, who are great drivers, but they are only pushed that much more to perform P1 and P2 in a really good McLaren car. Again, like Charles Leclerc, amazing driver, driving a horrible car. So, as much as Checo and Bottas are great drivers, what are we going to do about the car? So, with the car, we have its Ferrari-supplied power unit and gearbox. And the 2026 F1 cars are going to be modeled differently than what they are right now.
Right. It is expected that these 2026 cars are kind of going to emulate the era between 2003 to 2007.
Right. And so
Indeed.
They are reverting back to the V10 engine. So right now we were on the V12 engine from the beginning of F1 of the F1 sport. We started with the V6, I believe.
It was kind of like a V6 hybrid that
Yes.
ran on oil instead
Yes.
of, natural
Yeah.
gas.
It was
Sounds
that
about
was
right.
quite interesting. But we started with the V6 and made our way to the V8, the V10, and now we're on the V12. For the 2026 season, we are reverting back to the V10. With the V10, we have risk for more combustion of the engines, which posed a risk to the drivers, which is why it was upgraded to the V12. Despite these combustions of the engine, the race will become that much more interesting because it allows for the cars to go a lot faster than what they're currently running on, which is the V12.
Absolutely, but then again, you have to remember that if you're going to implement old materials, you have to keep up with the new times.
Yes.
So that means they're going to have to update not just the chassis or the gearbox or MGU power units. They're going to have to update the software hella. Like, it's going to be... Think about it like from when we went from 4G to 5G cellular data networks. We're basically jumping 5G to 15G. We're pulling off China.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. And not to mention all the aerodynamic factors that you have to take into consideration as well. And as we saw with F1 and McLaren's, they're already having some advancements with their respective cars. So for F1, for example, their newer cars are designed to, or set to be designed to be, narrower and shorter to increase agility on the track. And that includes slashing the wheelbase by about 200 millimeters, which would be around the length of your average reusable drinks bottle, to 3,400 millimeters, while the width has been cut down by 100 millimeters. So that would obviously mean that the floor width has had to be cut by 150 millimeters as well. So with this reduction in size, or I guess length, it means a reduction of weight, which again would help with the agility of the vehicle, since making turns around those sharp corners on the track and making all their maneuvers would be feasible because of the lessened weight. As for the tire updates, these were the few things that I would argue remain consistent because according to my research, they haven't really changed all that substantially. The 18-inch wheel size, which replaced the 13-inch spec in 2022 remains. However, there are just some minor iterations here and there, but it is expected that these tire updates will grip to the track more firmly so as to reduce the number of crashes.
And of course, they're going to have to rely on less tire pressure because, again,
Exactly.
lighter cars, more aerodynamics.
Right.
Even though reliability does play a part, it doesn't play a part on the external factors as much as it does the internal factors and team developments and just making sure that everything is sturdy and steady.
Right. We have
Indeed.
all of these aspects, and they're just all contributing to a more exciting, more faster race. Okay, we, as Sergio mentioned, we have a reduced size of the cars. They're going to be much smaller. They're going to be more agile. They can be like a reduced width of the wheels, but we'll see about that. There's going to be less downforce. We're going to reduce downforce by 15% compared to the older generations of the cars. More active aerodynamics. So the front and rear wings will have elements that the drivers can adjust to reduce the drag on straights. They have a bit of a more simpler design now to reduce the turbulent weight produced by cars. And the most important part for the 2026 season is that there is no DRS. So the active wings will replace the traditional DRS system. Okay, quick synopsis. Go ahead and explain what DRS is. Drag reduction system.
The drag reduction system adds anywhere between 22 to 24 kilometers per hour of extra speed when activated on the main straights or the DRS zones in a Formula One car, and it oftentimes depends on how successful the aerodynamics of the car are, because while the speed stays the same when DRS is activated, the overall drag and the overall strength of your braking point also determines how well that DRS works. Like, for instance, we know that McLaren and Williams do very well with DRS because of not only the design of their back wing, but also how much they contribute to aerodynamics and how well they analyze the track. Meanwhile, teams like Mercedes, Haas, and arguably enough, I would say, even Alpine and Ferrari, they focus more on engine, chassis, developing the car to match the driver's style. It's kind of a murkyish gray area.
Adding on to that, the McLarens are very good on the straights, and that is also because of the DRS, whereas you have the Mercedes, which are really good in those tight turns, so they won't implement it as much.
I guess we could kind of go into our personal expectations for how Cadillac and each of the drivers will perform. Who wants to start us off?
I have high hopes for Cadillac, especially with these new improvements to the car. And, you know, whenever a new team is produced into the sport, sometimes they can start off on a really good high. There have been teams like Haas where it's been touch and go, and throughout the sport they have been performing worser and worser. But, you know, it could go in the opposite direction where we start off on a really good high. And I think that Cadillac will perform very well with these highly revered drivers.
I personally think it could go either one of two ways. There seems to be just no middle ground. It could be a Braun GP 2009 situation where they have, I wouldn't say the most minimal, but a decent amount of investments, not like as low as Haas level or as high as Ferrari level, but maybe like Alpine or Kick Sauber level. And they absolutely dominate the first half of the season, maybe even the first three quarters, fall off a little bit, and then have to delve into some new branding from 2027 or 2028 onwards, and they will have developed the engines. Or it could be a hybrid of a Haas-Marussia situation. Because if you remember the way that Haas performed in 2016 to 2019, they were kind of, backmarking it just a little bit. And there would be moments where they shine, like Australia 2019, Austria 2018, or maybe even 2017 in Monaco. 2018 was a bit of a fluke. That's why they got fifth place. But even then, they could have pulled off more miracles. Case in point, I just feel like they could go up, or...
With having such revered drivers, I think they would be making a huge mistake if it, went up in flames. With having such great drivers, I think they would be very well to be careful and produce a great car. Like, we cannot be wasting these drivers.
Right. I'm not trying to say that these drivers aren't well seasoned or have their heads in the game. I mean, obviously they know what they're doing, and they've had personal challenges, which I think strengthens their mentality. Like, I don't know if you know this, but Valtteri Bottas suffered from an eating disorder in the very opening of his from 2013 to 2014, the very opening of his F1 career, and he had to get a lot of counseling and therapy. He had to consult to his ex-girlfriend a whole lot about this. And, of course, Checo was moved to Europe at a very, very young age from Guadalajara. And so he felt kind of homesick and just really, distanced from his family and the people he knew and loved. And he felt like if it wasn't worth it, then what am I even here for? Why am I even a racing driver? Why am I even trying to make myself a man if I can't make my dad proud? So they've come on top of a lot of these challenges and through a lot of very key moments, like for Bottas being signed with Mercedes and being able to prove his potential, even though as a number 2 driver, and with Checo when he won his first race after 190 race starts.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I think their mentality could honestly drive the team a whole lot further than they first expected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as you said, they are seasoned drivers. I think they would do well to take it farther. The team in itself, I think they will consistently place, for the constructors at least, I think they will place in the top 5.
Ooh, for constructors, I think they would start off a solid 8th.
Start off
a solid 8th. Maybe they could push up to 7th or 6th if they get lucky.
In later seasons or later in the 2026 season?
Later in 2026. And they're going to stay stagnant there, and they're going to have to really push it out because not only is the controversy of Checo's looming 2024 performance and the questionable ethics of the team under the guise of Pat Simmons cheating, but think about this. American fatigue. They are an American brand based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, the most motorsport city in the entire country. So obviously you're going to be bringing in a whole lot of new American fans, which is not bad for the sport on like a macroeconomic standpoint. But think about how many Europeans and maybe even Asians are going to get tired of Americans coming in and trying to quote-unquote de-traditionalize the sport, even though they come in with good intentions and actual interest in the sport. Social media talks a whole lot, so I don't know. It's a bit of an ambiguous area.
Indeed. And not to mention that while both Bottas and Pérez have had very good career highlights and have pushed through multiple challenges, they can't be considered perfect per se, because let's not forget the fact that we're talking about Pérez, who got, I don't know if you remember this, back in 2011, he got disqualified from the Australian Grand Prix
his
because
opening
of his
race.
Yes, because of an illegal right wing on the rear of his car.
And see, I think that's not a Perez issue. I think that is
a
team issue.
Yeah.
It's more of a team issue, true, but who's to say that history can't repeat itself? Because, I mean, history does have a way of repeating itself. And in terms of my overall predictions for both of these guys, as well as, by extension, Cadillac as a whole, yeah, they show a great deal of promise, but I feel like either one of two things could happen. So both of these guys can come up on top and actually make a good winning streak for Cadillac themselves, or in the case of Pérez, not to bash on him or anything, but he has, if I'm not mistaken, he has had to take a break from 2025 following his termination with Red Bull in 2024. So he may be a tad rusty on the track. So I think if he were to really, really team up with Bottas or some other experienced driver on the track, I feel like he'd be able to redeem himself and show that he is a valuable asset to the Cadillac industry on the sports field. Now,
this isn't really rare that a driver will take a year off or he won't have a team to drive for a whole year. I don't necessarily agree with the rusty part because it's happened before, and that's what preseason testing is for. That's what
exactly. Of
yes,
course. And
that's what free practices are for.
We got to remember Alonso as well. I mean, he was already rusty coming to the end of his stint at McLaren from 2015 to 2018. He comes back 3 years later after, of course, he did race in Le Mans, but that is an endurance league.
That type of endurance driving is a completely different format from F1. It requires a different type of mentality and strength in itself.
Exactly. And I think that because these endurance races call for such tenacity and long-form focus, that it actually benefited Alonso for the better, which is why he was able to score a podium on his return season and keep up consistently with the Alpine, even though it consistently was not delivering for him. And he seems to be doing okay for now. Of course, he had a rough start at the beginning of the season. And listen, I'll be the first to admit, I was questioning him, man. I did not know whether or not he was going to be able to get his charts together.
And for those of you who don't know what a Le Mans is, it's a 24-hour race. And yes, I think that again, Perez, even Bottas and Perez having a year off, will probably still come back strong.
They're still going to come back decent. It's not like they're going to go the first half without scoring any points.
Right.
One of them is going
True.
to, let's call the shots here. I'm going to bet $20 that they are going to, at least one of them is going to score points in the first 2 races.
Mm-hmm.
Don't want to go too strong or get on my high horse by saying, oh, debut is going to be smooth ride.
No, yeah.
So first 2 races, at least one of them is going to score points. $20 on that.
Yeah, I think my money would be more on Bottas. I mean, again, I'm not bashing on Perez, but I mean, given the fact that because Bottas, at least, even when his last contract with, what was that last company he worked for?
He was with
Sauber, yeah. So even though he terminated his contract in Sauber earlier, right, he still had like a year or so back with Mercedes, which he didn't.
Right,
yeah,
of course. And it's a big front-running team at this point in time.
Doing ad PR, helping rookie drivers who he knew were in his place. So he was at least more involved in the motorsport department at this time.
Rather than discrediting Checo, people are putting their money more over on Bottas because he actually has the head strength, the will, a little bit more tenacity in terms of performing with the car than rather than just driving it. People have their money more over on Bottas.
Yeah, Bottas is just a great driver to be one with this car. He knows a lot about the specs of the car that he drives, and I think he has potential as a race engineer. But, let's not also forget that Perez was the only other driver apart from Carlos Sainz in the 2023 season to score those pole positions. So if you don't know what I'm talking, yes, exactly. And if you didn't know what I'm talking about, in 2023, as I said earlier, Max Verstappen
19 out of 22 wins. 19 out of 22 wins. Checo scored two of those last 3 wins in the first 4 races.
Right,
and Carlos Sainz won in
Singapore.
In his Ferrari. Yes.
Again, Singapore curse strikes Max Verstappen. He's only been able to finish second at its highest in 2018. Still no wins. We're going to see where that goes. But I think we should probably end off the episode here. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And please tune in next week for episode 3. I'm your host, Trey.
I'm Ash.
And I'm Sachet.
And we will see you guys next week. Peace out.
Bye-bye.